Remember that iconic 1989 classic, Steel Magnolias, a heartwarming and heartbreaking tale of Southern women gathering at Truvy's beauty spot in small-town Louisiana. At its heart was Shelby, played by Julia Roberts, a young bride with type 1 diabetes, determined to become a mother despite the risks. Her mother, Malin, portrayed by Sally Field, knew pregnancy could be fatal, but Shelby pressed on. The star-studded cast included Dolly Parton as the warm-hearted salon owner, Truvy, Shirley MacLaine as the gloriously grumpy Wiser, Olympia Dukakis as the sharp-tongued Clary, and Daryl Hannah as the shy newcomer, Annelle. They made audiences laugh, cry, and immediately call their mothers. But the true story behind the film is even more heartbreaking than what graced the screen, because everything you're about to hear actually happened. Today, we're revealing 15 incredible facts about Time's Steel Magnolias, times you probably didn't know, including the real Shelby's mother and the only moment of peace she ever found. Number 15. The director was so awful, the cast had to stage an intervention. Behind all the Southern sweetness was a director allergic to kindness. Herbert Ross, a veteran filmmaker and notoriously difficult personality, transformed the set of Time's Steel Magnolias times into an emotional boot camp, with himself as the drill sergeant. He was particularly brutal to Julia Roberts, criticizing nearly every choice she made and frequently reducing her to tears. Sally Field later recounted how awful Ross was to Roberts, who was the youngest cast member and essentially the baby of the set. The veteran actresses rallied around her. He even asked Dolly Parton if she could act, to which Dolly's legendary response was, "No, but it's your job to make me look like I can." Ross knew better than to try that with Sally Field. She would have devoured him. But his constant harassment of Roberts pushed the more seasoned members of the cast to their limit. Here's the thing. Ross was actively grieving his own loss. His wife, prima ballerina Nora Kay, had died about 18 months before filming began. They had been married for almost 30 years, and that grief still haunted him during production. Shirley MacLaine finally confronted him directly, telling Ross he had been behaving badly since Nora's death and that it wasn't respectful to his late wife or the cast. The veteran actresses made it clear his behavior was unacceptable. It turns out, all it took to silence a tyrannical director was a couple of screen legends who refused to watch a 1-year-old get emotionally demolished for his grief issues. The actresses bonded over their shared dislike of him, which is likely why the female friendship on screen felt so incredibly real. Number 14. Every actress in Hollywood passed on Shelby before Julia Roberts. Before Julia Roberts became Shelby, the role went through more actresses than a Hollywood game of hot potato. Here's the twist. Daryl Hannah was actually offered the role first. The producers wanted her for the lead, but she declined, opting to play Annelle instead, the quirky beautician with big hair and questionable life choices. Hannah looked at the dying young mother role and the eccentric side character, and chose chaos, which is respectable. So, they pivoted to Meg Ryan, who had signed on but then bailed for times when Harry Met Sally. A decent trade for her, but catastrophic for producers scrambling to fill the role. They considered Winona Ryder next, but she was only 16 or 17 at the time, making the part of a diabetic mother dying from pregnancy complications a tough sell too young even for Hollywood's creative approach to age-appropriate casting. Laura Dern also made the list of possibilities, but didn't land it. Finally, the casting director brought in Julia Roberts, who was still filming Time's Mystic Pizza Times and had zero name recognition. She walked into the room, flashed that smile, and instantly captured the essence of the great Southern gal. Turns out, when Plan A chooses the comedic relief role instead, Plan E gets an Oscar nomination. Number 13. Julia Roberts studied for the role at the Harling's house over burgers. Once Julia Roberts secured the role, she didn't just read the script and show up on set. She went straight to the source. Roberts spent time with Robert Harling's parents before filming began, learning about Susan, the real woman behind Shelby. His dad grilled hamburgers in the backyard while Roberts listened to stories about the sister he had lost. Harling later said that when Roberts first walked in, somebody just turned the lights on in the room. Not because she looked like Susan, but because she carried something similar, a warmth or energy, the kind of presence that made people want to be around her. Roberts wasn't just preparing for a role. She was collecting memories of someone she never met, piecing together who Susan was through her parents' stories, her brother's grief, and probably a few Dolly songs in between. When the cameras rolled, Roberts was honoring someone else's sister, a character built from backyard conversations and secondhand love. Number 12. Robert Harling wrote the entire play in 10 days after his sister died. Robert Harling didn't sit down to write a hit play. He sat down to keep from losing his mind. In 1985, his sister Susan died at 33 from type 1 diabetes complications, the same complications that killed Shelby on screen. Doctors told her pregnancy could be fatal, but she wanted a baby anyway. In 1983, she gave birth to a son, Robert, named after Harling himself. 2 years later, she was gone. Harling's nephew was barely old enough to remember her, and Harling started spiraling. What if the child forgot his mother entirely? What if he grew up calling some stepmother Mama without ever knowing who Susan truly was? A writer friend told him to write it down, so Harling tried a short story that lasted approximately 5 minutes before he realized Southern women do not fit in paragraphs. They need dialogue, interruptions, and the kind of verbal warfare that requires an actual stage. So he locked himself in a room and wrote the entire play in 10 days. Not an outline, the whole thing. What he later called a 24/7 tsunami of Southernness just poured out. Off-Broadway audiences were emotionally demolished by what looked like harmless beauty shop gossip. The 1989 film turned it into a national ugly cry event. 10 Days of Grief turned into the play everyone quotes at brunch, and Harling wrote it for his nephew. The rest of us just borrowed it for our own breakdowns. Number 11. Julia Roberts got engaged to her fake husband, and it didn't last. Julia Roberts and Dylan McDermott played newlyweds in Time Steel Magnolias. By the time filming wrapped, they were engaged in real life. Roberts had recently ended a relationship with Liam Neeson, and then McDermott showed up playing her devoted husband in a small Louisiana town with nothing to do but fall in love on camera. Spend 3 months pretending to be madly in love, and apparently your brain decides the fake marriage should become real. The romance started during production in 1989. Hollywood declared it destiny. It was actually just proximity and pretty good lighting. The movie came out in November 1989. The engagement lasted until 1990, right up until Roberts met Kiefer Sutherland on the set of Time's Flatliners, and the whole cycle started over again. 1 year. That's how long it took for reality to catch up with the on-set fantasy. Roberts went on to become one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. McDermott landed a steady paycheck on Times, the practice times, for 7 seasons. Both, it seems, recovered just fine. Number 10. Bette Davis invited Harling to tea and started casting his entire movie. Bette Davis saw Times steal Magnolias Times on stage in New York and decided Weezer was hers. She picked up the phone, called Robert Harling directly, and invited him to tea like they were old friends discussing garden parties. Harling thought someone was messing with him. He walked into a New York hotel, and there sat Bette Davis with a teacup, already talking like the role was locked. Then she started casting the rest of the movie for him. Katharine Hepburn for Clary, Elizabeth Taylor for Truvy. Just casually assembling an entire cast of legends, while Harling sat there wondering if he had any say in his own film. As he left, Davis hit him with this threat disguised as politeness. You may give the role of Weiser to someone else, but you and they will hear from Bette Davis. Producers passed, saying she was too frail for the physical demands. Davis died in 1989, the same year the movie came out. Shirley MacLaine got the part and delivered the exact kind of unhinged energy Davis would have brought. At least, someone understood the assignment. Number 9. Sally Field's breakdown was so brutal they couldn't ask for take 2. The funeral scene took multiple days to film, with different angles, coverage shots, and the whole technical setup. But Sally Field's performance, the cemetery breakdown everyone remembers, was one take. One take. Field prepared by spending hours screaming into a pillow to wreck her voice. She wanted it raw, ragged, and completely shredded. When the cameras rolled, director Herbert Ross just let her go. No stopping, no redirecting. Just Field tearing through every stage of grief without anyone yelling, "Cut." The entire emotional arc was captured in one uninterrupted performance. When Field finished that take, nobody moved. The crew just stood there, not knowing what to say. Sometimes you can't direct grief. You just get out of its way. Number 8. Dolly Parton and Daryl Hannah got intensive hairstyling training. Director Herbert Ross demanded authentic salon scenes, which created an immediate problem. His actresses had no idea how to actually do hair. The solution: bring in professional hairstylists to train them like they were prepping for their cosmetology boards. Not beauty school, but close enough. They underwent intensive, hands-on training until they could cut, tease, spray, and gossip simultaneously without looking like complete frauds. Dolly Parton, a woman who has maintained the exact same hairstyle for decades, had to learn professional salon techniques for other people's hair. She spent weeks mastering skills she would never use again after filming Wrapped. The opening wedding scene required her to work on Julia Roberts' hair while delivering lines and hitting comedic beats. One wrong snip, and America's newest sweetheart gets a bald spot on camera. No pressure, right? Ross refused to let them fake it with camera tricks or strategic angles. If his actresses were going to play salon professionals, they needed to actually know what they were doing with scissors and a can of hairspray. The training worked. Nobody watching the movie questions whether Truvy and Annelle know their way around a beauty parlor. Number 7. Sally Field's casual complaint became Robert Harling's next movie. Filming in small-town Natchitoches, Louisiana, meant zero nightlife and not much to do after wrapping for the day. So, the cast did what any group of famous people would do. They hung out together constantly. They would gather for games, conversation, and the kind of late-night bonding that happens when you're all surviving the same difficult director. Shirley MacLaine later said they became very good friends who were still there for each other. That chemistry everyone loved on screen came from these offset hangouts. During one of these gatherings, Robert Harling asked each actress what kind of role they'd like to play next standard Hollywood dinner conversation. Sally Field had an answer ready. She wanted to play a character who gets to wear nice clothes. After years of playing noble, earnest women in crumby wardrobes, Field wanted glamour and the freedom to be terrible. Harling filed that away like he was taking notes for a future project. 2 years later, he wrote Time's Soap Dish, an entire movie built around Sally Field playing exactly that. A glamorous nightmare in designer clothes. Never underestimate what will happen when you give a talented actress permission to complain about typecasting. Sometimes you get a whole new screenplay out of it. Number 6. The minister was Robert Harling. Robert Harling wrote Times, Steel Magnolias Times, as a way to process his sister Susan's death. When it was turned into a movie, the director, Herbert Ross, asked him to play the minister who officiates both Shelby's wedding and her funeral. So Harling, who wasn't an actor, had zero training, and was already emotionally wrecked from turning his family tragedy into a major motion picture, spent 2 days on set guiding his fictional sister through the most important rituals of her life. The wedding scene at the beginning of the film, that was Harling pronouncing Shelby and Jackson husband and wife. The funeral at the end, also Harling, this time committing her soul to God. He literally bookended Shelby's entire married life, from joy to devastation, while participating in his real sister's story. Ross thought Harling was the right person for the job, despite him not being a professional actor. Harling had filled in for an absent actor during the original stage production, so he wasn't completely unfamiliar with performing the material, but this was different. This was the movie version, with cameras, crew, and Julia Roberts bringing his sister back to life. Harling later described the experience as surreal, which feels like the understatement of the decade. Imagine writing about the worst thing that's ever happened to you, watching someone else perform it, and then stepping into the frame yourself to officiate the goodbye. It was another layer of catharsis in a project that was already one giant act of processing grief. Harling wrote it, produced it, and became part of it, honoring Susan by being present for every version of her story, even the one that hurts the most. Number 5. A love letter to Natchitoches, still blooming 35 years later. Robert Harling refused to film Time Steel Magnolias Times anywhere except Natchitoches, Louisiana. The town was his childhood, his sister's life, and the entire foundation of the story. It was non-negotiable. 35 years later, Natchitoches is still living in that world. Fans from around the globe make pilgrimages to walk the actual filming locations. The American Cemetery, where Sally Field had her breakdown. The Leamy House, where Weiser terrorized the neighborhood. Street. Augustine Catholic Church, where Shelby got married. People book flights to Louisiana, specifically to stand where fictional characters stood in a movie from 1989. For the 30th anniversary in 2019, the town threw a blush and bashful weekend and went full-time Steel Magnolias times superfan mode. Character look-alike contests took place on the riverbank. Kids hunted for Easter eggs in Beau Jardin, the exact spot where they filmed the movie's final scene, and then, naturally, a bleeding armadillo cake reception, because what else would you serve? The most meaningful part is that Natchitoches dedicated an entire park to Susan Harling Robinson, not the character, the real woman. The Susan Harling Robinson Memorial Park has a fountain, benches, and a memorial plaque with her photo and biography written by her brother, Robert. One movie gave a small Louisiana town a permanent place in pop culture, and that town turned around and gave Susan a permanent place to be remembered. 35 years later, people still show up, not just for the movie, but also for her. Number 4. You can actually sleep in Shelby's house. The Eatonton family home from Time Steel Magnolias Times isn't just a landmark you drive past. It's a fully operational bed and breakfast where fans can live out their Southern Belle fantasies. The Steel Magnolia House at 320 Jefferson Street in Natchitoches is the actual house where they filmed all those family scenes. Built around 1841, this Greek Revival home is where Sally Field, Tom Skerritt, and Julia Roberts brought the Eatonton family to life. And now you can book a room there. During filming, the family who owned the house temporarily relocated so the production could take over. After the movie became a phenomenon, someone realized they were sitting on a gold mine of nostalgia. The house officially became a B&B, and they went all in on the theme. There are 6 suites, each named after a character from the film. Want to stay in the Shelby room? Well, it's decorated in her signature blush and bashful pink. And here's the kicker. The place is filled with framed movie posters, production photos, and memorabilia from the set. Guests can eat a traditional Southern breakfast in the dining room where the cast filmed their meals, then watch the movie in the actual family room where those scenes happened. It's basically a full immersive times, Steel Magnolias times experience for people who don't just want to watch the movie, they want to live it for a weekend. And honestly, for fans who have watched this film 100 times, sleeping in Shelby's actual house probably feels like the ultimate pilgrimage. Number 3. Lifetime's 2012 remake was a ratings powerhouse. 23 years after the original, Lifetime decided Times, Steel Magnolias Times, needed a remake with an all-black cast. The cast was stacked. Queen Latifah as Malin, Jill Scott as Truvy, Alfre Woodard as Weezer, Phylicia Rashad as Clary, Adepero Oduye as Anel, and Condola Rashad as Shelby. That's a lot of heavyweight talent for a Sunday night Lifetime movie. The decision was deliberate, though. Producers Craig Zidane and Neil Maron wanted to give talented black actresses the kind of meaty, complex leading roles that were still hard to come by in Hollywood. As Maron put it, the story's core themes transcend race. If it was all Latina, if it was all Asian, it would still be Times Steel Magnolias. They updated the setting to contemporary times, with references to Michelle Obama and smartphones, while keeping the original play's dialogue and structure intact. Queen Latifah also produced, which meant she handled both the emotional breakdown scenes and the business side. The remake premiered on the 7th of October 2012 and pulled in 5 million viewers, Lifetime's third most watched original movie ever, and their biggest hit since 2006. Critics inevitably compared it to the 1,989 original, because how could they not? But many praised the new cast performances, particularly Alfre Woodard and Phylicia Rashad, and acknowledged the universal themes worked beautifully in the new setting. Turns out, a story about women supporting each other through grief doesn't belong to any one cast or era. It just needs the right people to tell the story. Number 2, they hired the nurse who actually pulled Shelby's life support. Okay, now we need to talk about the most intense casting decision in movie history. Director Herbert Ross wanted the hospital scenes to feel authentic, which is fair enough. So, he tracked down the real medical staff who had cared for Susan Harling Robinson during her final days. And then he cast them in the movie, including the nurse who turned off Susan's life support, the same nurse, playing herself, doing the same thing again. Robert Harling said it added a sense of real gravity and reality to it all. Which, yes, that'll do it. There's authentic, and then there's recreating the actual trauma. Harling's mother stood behind the monitors during filming, watching a reenactment of her daughter's death. The beeps were real. The movements were real. These were just people reliving one of the worst days of their lives after someone yelled, "Action." The line between performance and memory didn't just blur. It straight up vanished, which gave the scene an authenticity that was impossible to fake and impossible to forget. Number 1. The real Shelby's mother needed to see Julia Roberts stand up alive. When they filmed the scene where Julia Roberts' life support is disconnected, Robert Harling begged his mother not to come to set. He was worried it would be too painful watching an actress recreate your daughter's final moments while a camera crew adjusted the lighting. Margaret Harling showed up anyway. She sat through the filming without saying a word. When it wrapped, Robert asked her why she'd put herself through that, and her answer was, "I wanted to see Julia get up and walk away." That was the whole point. Not the performance, not the emotional accuracy. She needed to watch the woman playing her dead daughter stand up perfectly alive and walk off set like nothing happened. Julia Roberts had become so close to the Harling family during filming that Margaret needed that moment. In real life, she never got to see her own daughter do that. But on a movie set in Louisiana, she could watch Shelby die and then watch her come back. It only lasted until someone yelled, "Cut." But for those few seconds, her daughter got up and walked away. Hollywood gave her the ending she never got in real life.